Come on, sweetheart, smile a little. You think you are too good to serve me just because you are pretty?
The man's voice slithered across the nearly empty diner, thick with liquor and arrogance. The waitress stiffened, tray trembling slightly in her hands. He leaned closer, the gold watch on his wrist flashing under the fluorescent lights. Too loud, too polished for a place that smelled like burnt coffee and bleach. The rain fell in slow, relentless sheets against the fogged windows of the Silver Spoon Diner. It was just past midnight, and the only customers left were the kind who didn't want to be seen. Truckers between routes, night janitors killing time before the next shift, a couple who hadn't spoken to each other in 20 minutes. The neon sign outside flickered, throwing soft blue light across the chrome tables. Ethan Cole sat in the corner booth, sleeves rolled up, hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug that cost him $1.50, but bought him 15 minutes of peace. His body ached in the way only honest work could make it ache. 40 floors of mopped marble, polished glass, and disinfected restrooms had left a permanent stiffness in his shoulders. He was 38 years old, a single father, and a man who measured his life in shifts. He wore his janitor's uniform still, gray coveralls faded from too many washes, work boots stained from cleaning solvents. The name tag on his chest read E. Cole, though most people just called him, "Hey, Maintenance." He didn't mind. Names didn't pay rent. The cheap diner coffee steamed faintly as he took it was bitter and thin, but it kept him awake long enough to get through the next job at the parking complex down on 8th Street. Outside, the city hummed, the late buses groaning at stoplights, distant sirens cutting through the rain. The sound of a world that never slept. A folded notebook sat beside his coffee, open to a page filled with tight, neat handwriting, numbers mostly. Rent, $1,250. Utilities, $280. Groceries, $450. Lucy's asthma medication, $300. School supplies, bus fare, secondhand shoes, another $200 if he was careful. $2,490 a month, and he earned just enough to stay 2 weeks behind. He'd long stopped calling it survival. It was more like slow-motion endurance. Every decision had weight now. Which bills could wait? Which meals could stretch? Which promises he could still afford to keep to an 8-year-old who believed her father was a superhero because he said monsters couldn't reach her here. The door opened with a chime, scattering a little trail of rainwater on the tiles. Ethan glanced up automatically. 3 men walked in, their laughter too loud for the hour. They carried the smell of money, cologne, leather, and something else, a kind of careless confidence that came from never worrying about overdraft fees. The leader was tall, 30-something, his dark hair slicked back, his suit probably worth more than Ethan's. Monthly rent. His name, as the waitress greeted him, was Ryan Halden. Ethan had heard it before. Halden Financial Group had its logo printed on the side of the skyscraper he cleaned twice a week. Ryan barely looked at the waitress when he ordered. 3 coffees, black. And make sure it's not that dishwater you usually serve. His tone wasn't cruel exactly. It was worse. It was bored. The kind of tone that made people smaller without raising a voice. The waitress, a young woman with her blonde hair tied neatly in a low ponytail, didn't flinch. She simply wrote the order down, her voice steady. "Right away, sir." There was something refined about the way she spoke. Too careful, too precise for someone earning tips past midnight. Ethan had noticed her before on his night stops here. Her name tag said Anna. She worked quietly, efficiently, never lingered, never complained. She always made sure his coffee was refilled before he asked. She reminded him of someone pretending to belong in a place they were only visiting, but he didn't pry. Everyone in that diner had a reason for being there, and most of them were private. He looked back down at his notebook, pretending not to hear Ryan's laughter from the other side of the room. The sound cut through the steady hiss of rain. So, This is what passes for service now, Ryan said. Come on, sweetheart, smile a little. You'll get better tips that way. The waitress kept moving, balancing the tray with quiet dignity. She set the cups down. Here you go, gentlemen. But when she turned to leave, Ryan's hand shot out, catching her wrist. Ethan froze. He didn't even realize he'd set his cup down until it clinked against the saucer. The sound was small but sharp in the silence that followed. The other customers pretended not to notice. The cook looked away, his face reflected dimly in the steel window of the kitchen door. Ethan's stomach tightened with that old, familiar heat, the kind that used to rise in the moments before things went bad overseas. Let go of me, Anna said softly, her voice still professional, still trying to make it something ordinary. Ryan grinned. Relax, I'm just asking how long you plan to keep playing Waitress before Daddy wires you another allowance. His words hung in the air, strange, almost cruel in their intimacy. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Something in the way Ryan said it made it sound like he knew her. Sir, she said again, struggling, please let go. Ryan's fingers tightened. What's a girl like you doing in a dump like this anyway? Looking for real people? Or just trying to feel alive for once? Ethan pushed himself up from the booth. The movement was calm, deliberate. His boots hit the floor with soft, steady thuds. He walked toward them the way he used to walk toward trouble when there wasn't anyone else to do it. I think the lady asked you to let go, he said. His voice carried no anger, just certainty. Ryan turned, disbelief flickering across his face. Excuse me, he said. You're interrupting a private conversation. Ethan stopped a few feet away. You're making it public by keeping your hand on her. Let go. Ryan laughed. A short, sharp sound. You know who I am? Someone who's about to make a mistake, Ethan said. For a second, no one moved. Rain rattled against the windows. The lights buzzed faintly. Ryan's two friends shifted in their seats, glancing at each other. Then, without warning, Ryan tried to stand, pulling Anna's arm as if to prove something. Ethan stepped forward and took Ryan's wrist, not hard, just enough to break the grip and twist it outward. Ryan stumbled, swore, tried to yank back, but Ethan guided him gently down against the booth's edge, the motion smooth, efficient, no wasted strength. Let go of her, Ethan said again, quieter this time. The tone didn't invite argument. Ryan's friends half rose but froze when Ethan's eyes met theirs. Sit, he said simply, and somehow they did. Anna backed away, rubbing her wrist, breathing fast. Ryan's face flushed red. You're finished, he hissed. You just assaulted me? You think anyone will believe a janitor over me? Ethan let go and stepped back. Everyone saw who put their hands on who first, he said. And even if they didn't, I'd still stop you. The manager came rushing out from behind the counter, flustered. Is there a problem here? Ryan straightened his suit, glaring. Yes, there's a problem. Call the police. This man attacked me. Ethan didn't argue. He just nodded once, calmly, like a man who'd already seen worse consequences. The waitress spoke, her voice trembling but clear. He was protecting me. Please don't twist this. The police arrived 12 minutes later. Ethan didn't resist. He gave his statement quietly. Ryan gave his with outrage. Phones had recorded pieces, but none of them showed the grab, only the moment Ethan took control. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the city slick with reflection. Ethan watched the neon lights ripple in a puddle at his feet as he waited by the patrol car. He thought of Lucy asleep at home, of the promise he'd made her the day her mother died, that he'd always do the right thing, no matter what it cost. And as the officer led him into the car, Ethan realized that sometimes the right thing came at full price, but some prices were worth paying. The patrol car smelled faintly of rain and disinfectant. Ethan sat in the back seat, hands resting loosely on his knees, watching the city slide by through streaked glass. He wasn't handcuffed. Lieutenant Paul Briggs had decided that wasn't necessary, but it still felt like a cage. The flashing blue lights ahead reflected against wet asphalt, painting everything in slow pulses of color. Midnight streets were almost empty now, except for delivery vans and the occasional cab. Ethan didn't say anything. He'd learned in the Marines that silence was sometimes the only armor left when you couldn't control the battlefield. Inside the station, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the kind of sterile brightness that stripped everything down to truth. The desk sergeant looked up, sighed when he saw who was walking in, and said, "Another diner dispute?" Briggs shook his head. "Something like that." They led Ethan to a metal chair, the kind with one leg slightly shorter than the others, so it rocked if you weren't careful. Across the room, Ryan Halden was already there, his suit damp, his hair perfectly in place again. A lawyer sat beside him. Sharp suit, sharper tongue. "My client was physically assaulted without provocation," the lawyer began, before Briggs even sat down. Ethan just kept his gaze fixed on the floor tiles. He'd been through worse interrogations, though the stakes this time were somehow heavier. Not his life, but his daughter's safety, their roof, their fragile balance. Briggs turned to him. "Mr. Cole, what happened tonight?" Ethan told him, simple as he could. The waitress, the grab, the words. He left out the part about fear because men like him weren't supposed to feel it. Ryan interrupted halfway through, his voice dripping with confidence. "He's lying. There's footage. You'll see it. He just wanted to play hero." Briggs rubbed his temples. "We'll get the footage. For now, both of you go home. No charges until I review the video." Ryan looked offended. "You're letting him walk?" Briggs's tone flattened. "No one's walking anywhere. I'm following procedure." Outside, the air was heavy with the smell of rain and exhaust. Ethan pulled his phone from his pocket and called Mrs. Chen, the neighbor who watched Lucy overnight. Her voice was kind, half asleep. "Everything okay, Ethan?" He hesitated. "Yeah, just a long night. I might be late for the morning shift." When he hung up, he stood for a long moment on the station steps, watching the rainwater trickle into the gutter, neon reflections bending like broken glass. At home, the apartment was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator. Lucy's drawing from school hung crooked on the wall, a stick figure family holding hands under a bright sun. He looked at it for a while before dropping into the couch, boots still wet. The exhaustion hit him like a weight pressing against his ribs. He thought about the look on the waitress's face. Anna, her tag had said. The shock, then relief. He hadn't done it for gratitude. He'd done it because doing nothing felt impossible. By morning, the story had changed hands. Someone had uploaded a shaky phone video titled "Violent Janitor Attacks, Customer at Diner." It had already hit 15,000 views by sunrise. The clip showed only the moment Ethan twisted Ryan's wrist, cut right before the waitress spoke. Comments. "Flooded in fast. Another unstable vet. Bet he wanted attention. Don't touch rich people. They'll ruin you." Ethan didn't read more. His phone buzzed again. His supervisor. "Ethan, I saw the video. We're getting calls from clients. Take the week off, all right? Corporate's nervous." Translation: "Don't come back." He stared at the phone until the screen dimmed. Lucy stirred from her room, her small voice carrying down the hallway. "Daddy, you're home?" He forced a smile before she came into view. "Yeah, sweetheart. Just taking a day off." She patted over in her socks, hugging him tight. "Did you help someone again?" she asked. "Mrs. Chen said you used to help people when you were a soldier." Ethan swallowed hard. "Something like that, kiddo." Later that afternoon, a knock sounded at his door. When he opened it, he found the same waitress from the diner standing there. Her hair was damp from the drizzle outside, her uniform replaced with a simple gray coat. She held a paper bag that smelled faintly of coffee and fresh bread. "I thought you might not have eaten," she said. Ethan blinked, surprised. "You didn't have to do that." "Maybe I needed to," she replied. He stepped aside to let her in. The apartment was small, but spotless. He couldn't afford mess. It made life harder. She set the bag down on the counter. "They twisted the story," she said quietly. "They're saying you attacked him." "I figured they would," Ethan said. "People like him don't lose easily." She hesitated, then added, "He knew me. He called me by a name I haven't used in months." Ethan looked at her more closely now. "Not Anna?" She shook her head. "Annabelle Langford. My father owns Langford Innovations." The name hit like static in the air. Even Ethan, who rarely followed the news, recognized it. One of those tech empires that seemed to own half the city. "Why were you working in a diner?" he asked. Not accusingly, but out of genuine confusion. She looked around, then met his eyes. "I needed to see what it felt like to earn something, to talk to people who aren't surrounded by glass walls. My father thinks I'm in Europe on a design fellowship." She smiled faintly. "He'll probably have a heart attack when he finds out." Ethan nodded slowly. "You don't owe me an explanation." She shook her head. "Maybe not, but you deserve one. You're losing everything because of something that happened to me." Her voice wavered. "I'm going to fix this." He almost laughed, but not unkindly. "You can't fix the world with good intentions, Miss Langford. They've got lawyers, media, and money. I've got a mop and a daughter." She met his gaze evenly. "Then maybe it's time they saw what real integrity looks like." That evening, the news cycle turned meaner. Ryan Halden appeared on a business channel, all polished contrition. "It's unfortunate," he said smoothly. "I was simply trying to calm a distressed employee. The man misread the situation." The host nodded sympathetically. "Are you pressing charges?" "I'll let my attorneys handle it," Ryan replied, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ethan watched the clip on his cracked phone screen. Lucy was coloring beside him, humming quietly. He muted the sound. There was a knock again. 2 quick raps, firm and official. He opened the door to find a woman in her 30s, professional but kind-eyed. "Mr. Cole, my name's Layla Torres. I'm with a nonprofit that offers legal aid to veterans. Someone at the diner called me last night." He blinked. "Who?" "A waitress," Layla said. "She didn't give her name, just said a good man needed help." For the first time in 2 days, Ethan felt something small and unfamiliar flicker in his chest. Hope, fragile as flame. "I can't afford a lawyer," he said. "You don't have to," Layla replied. "Just tell me everything." They sat at his kitchen table, her laptop open, keys clicking steadily as he recounted each moment. She listened without interruption, nodding occasionally. "We'll need the original footage," she said. "Not the phone clips. The diner security camera should have it." "They said it glared out," Ethan replied. "Too much light." Layla's jaw tightened. "Then someone tampered with it. Cameras don't just glare out. At the exact second an assault starts." She closed her laptop. "We'll find the truth, but I need you to stay calm. They'll dig into your past, your finances, even your military record. You ready for that?" Ethan thought of Lucy asleep in her room, of the folded flag on the mantel, of the promise he'd made to never let fear dictate his choices again. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I've been ready my whole life. Just didn't know what for." As Layla left, rain started again, light and steady, tapping the window like an old friend returning. Ethan watched the water gather along the sill and thought of the diner's neon glow reflected in puddles. Somewhere out there, people were talking about him, twisting his story, deciding what kind of man he was. But he knew the truth. He'd seen it in the eyes of a frightened woman, and in the mirror of his daughter's belief. And that, he decided, was enough reason to fight. The morning light crept in pale and uncertain through the blinds, cutting across Ethan's small living room in thin stripes. He hadn't slept. The clock on the wall said 6:42 a.m., but time had started to blur. He sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee gone cold hours ago. On the counter lay a stack of envelopes he hadn't opened. Utility bills, school reminders, a late notice from the rent office. And next to them, his phone, buzzing nonstop. Missed calls, unknown numbers, news alerts. His name was everywhere now, just not the way he'd ever wanted it to be. Janitor attacks executive in late-night dine-in altercation. That was the headline splashed across the local news feed. A blurred still frame of him mid-motion, arm outstretched, face unreadable. They'd frozen the worst possible moment, 1 second of control that looked like violence. The comments were worse. Another angry veteran, PTSD time bomb. Dangerous man with a record. Ethan didn't have a record, but the internet didn't care about facts. The internet cared about narrative. Lucy wandered out from her room, rubbing her eyes, her hair a sleepy halo. "Daddy," she said, yawning, "the TV said your name." He turned quickly, forcing a smile. "It's nothing, sweetheart. Grown-up stuff. You want pancakes?" She nodded, not noticing the tightness in his jaw. While she sat at the table drawing rainbows on scrap paper, Ethan flipped on the radio low enough that she wouldn't catch the words. Halden Financial Group confirms the man in the video was identified as Ethan Cole, a janitor at Halden Tower. The company released a statement expressing concern for the safety of their employees. He switched it off. The room was silent again except for the sound of Lucy's pencil scratching against paper. By the time he dropped her at school, people were already staring. One of the mothers, a woman he'd seen at every pickup, gave him that tight, polite smile people reserve for bad news they can't look away from. The principal called him into the office before he could leave. "Mr. Cole," she began gently, "we're getting calls from parents. Maybe it's best if Lucy stays home a few days until things calm down." Ethan stared at the woman for a long second, disbelief flattening into resignation. "Calm down," he repeated. "Right." He signed the withdrawal form with a hand that didn't shake. Back home, his phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't spam. It was Layla Torres. "Ethan," she said the moment he answered, "we've got a problem." Her voice was brisk but steady. "The diner's security footage is missing." He frowned. "Missing how?" "The owner said the system glitched, corrupted data. But that kind of corruption doesn't happen by accident. Someone deleted the first 5 minutes of that recording." Ethan's gut tightened. Ryan's people. "Most likely," she said. "And they're moving fast. Halden, filed a civil complaint for assault and defamation this morning. They're suing for damages." Ethan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple. "They want me to drown in paperwork until I give up." "Exactly," Layla replied. "They don't need to win. They just need to exhaust you, make you broke, make you quiet." There was a pause, then her tone softened. "Don't let them. I'm filing a counterclaim. But we'll need witnesses. Anyone else who was in that diner." Ethan's mind replayed the night. Faces blurred in memory. The cook. The trucker in the corner, the elderly couple who left early. "Maybe," he said finally, "maybe I can find someone." That evening, there was another knock on his door. Anna stood outside again, this time in jeans and a hooded jacket, her hair pulled back. No makeup, no pretense. She looked smaller somehow, less untouchable. "I saw the news," she said quietly. "They're destroying you." He gave a short laugh with no humor in it. "They're professionals. They've had practice." She stepped inside. "You shouldn't be alone in this." He poured her coffee, black and bitter. "Alone is cheaper." Anna looked around again at the modest space, the patchy walls, the old sofa, the little desk covered in Lucy's drawings. "You shouldn't have to live like this," she said softly. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Like what? Honest?" She winced, then met his gaze. "I didn't mean it that way. I meant you shouldn't have to pay for what happened. My father's company has PR teams. We could help you. A statement, an attorney, anything." Ethan shook his head. "You can't fix this with money. You can't buy the truth." "It's not about buying," she insisted. "It's about balance." He leaned back, tired. "There's no balance in a system where a man like Halden can ruin me before breakfast." She didn't argue. She just looked at him with something that wasn't pity. It was guilt, the kind that runs deep. "My father called me this morning," she said finally. "He found out I've been working at the diner. He wants me to come home, to stay quiet. He said I'm endangering the family's reputation." She gave a small, bitter smile. "I think he's more worried about the stock price than the truth." Ethan studied her face, the calm precision behind her anger. "So what are you going to do?" She hesitated, then said, "What you did. Stand up." The next day, Layla called again. "Ethan, we've got something. A truck driver named Marcus Glenn. He was in the corner booth that night. He saw everything. He's willing to give a statement." Relief washed through Ethan like sunlight breaking through cloud. "That's something," he said. "It's more than something," Layla replied. "It's our foothold." But before Relief could settle, the other shoe dropped. That afternoon, 2 men in suits came to his building. They weren't police. They were polite, even smiled. But their message was sharp. "Mr. Cole, our client would like to resolve this quietly," one of them said. $50,000 and an NDA. You agree not to pursue further claims, and all this disappears." Ethan looked at the envelope they slid across the table. It was thick, crisp, filled with the promise of an easier life. Rent for a year, Lucy's school back on track, debt gone. He stared at it for a long time before pushing it back. "Tell your client he can keep his money. I'm not for sale." The men exchanged glances. "You're making a mistake," one said. Ethan's voice stayed calm. So did he. That night, a car idled outside his building for nearly an hour. Ethan noticed the headlights through the curtains. He didn't call the police. He just watched. The car left eventually, but he knew what it meant. Intimidation, a warning. When he tucked Lucy into bed, she asked why he'd locked the windows. "Just being careful," he said, brushing her hair back. "Like when you check the doors before sleeping." She nodded, trusting, her faith unshaken. Meanwhile, Anna faced her own storm. Her father's advisors cornered her in a conference room at Langford Tower. "You're playing with fire," one of them warned. "If you speak out, it drags the company into scandal." She stood at the window overlooking the city lights. "Maybe the scandal isn't me working at a diner. Maybe it's men like Ryan, thinking they can do anything because no one stops them." When she left the meeting, she found Finn Rivers, her father's head of security, waiting by the elevator. Former Special Forces, quiet and unreadable. "Your father asked me to keep an eye on you," he said. "So I am." She met his eyes. "Then you saw what happened?" Finn nodded once. "I did my homework. Ethan Cole isn't your enemy. He's the reason this didn't get worse." That evening, Ethan received a message on his phone. a video attachment with no sender ID. He hesitated before pressing play. It was grainy, but clear enough. Lucy, walking home from school. A zoomed-in shot from across the street. The message underneath? Keep quiet. He sat there for a long time staring at the screen, his pulse steady but cold. Then he called Layla. "It's not just a lawsuit anymore," he said. "They're watching us." Layla's voice was quiet but firm. "Then we bring it to the police. Witness intimidation is a felony." "You really think that'll stop them?" "No," she said, "but it'll start something." Ethan ended the call and looked out at the city through his small window. Rain again, faint this time, like an old rhythm repeating. Somewhere out there, people like Ryan slept easy, believing money could erase consequences. But for the first time, Ethan felt the faint hum of a different kind of power. The power of being right and not bending. It wasn't loud or rich or televised. It was the kind that endured. The kind that didn't fade when the lights turned off. The next morning started with the sound of sirens in the distance and the smell of burnt toast. Ethan stood by the small kitchen counter, staring at the darkened bread as if it had answers. Lucy was still asleep in her room, curled beneath a blanket decorated with stars. The quiet gave him time to think, something he wasn't sure he wanted. His phone sat on the table, a glowing reminder of the world outside. Messages from Layla, from unknown numbers, from reporters wanting a comment he'd never give. He took a long breath and opened Layla's text. "Meet me downtown at 10. We have a development." By the time Ethan reached her office, the rain had thinned into a steady drizzle, the kind that turned the city's concrete into mirrors. Layla's office was small, cluttered with case files, legal pads, and a dying fern near the window. She was pacing when he arrived. "They crossed a line," she said without preamble. "I talked to Lieutenant Briggs. Those photos of your daughter. They're investigating them as harassment and intimidation." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You think that'll stop them?" "No," she said. "But it builds our case. Every time they move, we gain ground." She gestured to the man sitting by her desk. "Ethan, this is Marcus Glenn." The truck driver stood, extending a hand. His palm was rough, the kind of handshake that came from years on the road. "We met that night," Marcus said. "Corner booth. I saw everything." Ethan nodded slowly. "You didn't have to come forward." Marcus looked down. "I told myself it wasn't my business, but my kid saw the news. Asked why the man who helped the lady was being called dangerous. I couldn't answer that. So here I am." Layla smiled faintly. His statement's solid. It matches the timeline, the sequence. He even remembered the color of the waitress's apron. Ethan exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. That's something. "It's more than something," Layla said. "It's momentum." Across the city, in a glass tower that scraped the clouds, Annabelle Langford was facing her own reckoning. Her father, Martin Langford, stood at the head of a conference table surrounded by lawyers and PR advisors. His voice was calm, but sharp as a blade. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" She didn't look away. "I told the truth." "You humiliated this family," he snapped. "You've turned our name into gossip fodder." "No," she said quietly. "Ryan Halden did that. I just stopped pretending not to see it." The room went still. One of the PR executives cleared his throat. "Mr. Langford, if I may, public silence may be the best approach for now." Annabelle leaned forward. "Silence is what lets men like Halden thrive. You built a company on innovation, on progress. Maybe start applying those principles to people." Her father's expression flickered. Anger, confusion, then something harder to define. "You're out of your depth," he said finally. "Let me handle this." She gathered her folder and stood. "That's the problem. You've been handling everything for too long." When she stepped into the corridor, Finn Rivers was waiting. He leaned against the wall, arms folded. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad," he said, "but not fatal." She gave a humorless laugh. "For me? Or the company?" "Both, if you're not careful," he replied. "You planning to testify?" "If it comes to that," she said. "You think I shouldn't?" Finn studied her for a long moment. "I think your father's not used to people doing the right thing when it costs them something." She gave a small nod. Neither is his world. Back in the neighborhood Ethan called home, the tension thickened. The car that had idled outside the previous night returned. Different license plate this time. Same feeling. He didn't bother calling anyone. He just wrote down the number, then placed a chair beneath Lucy's bedroom window, a small precaution only a father would think of. That night she fell asleep to the sound of rain and the low hum of her father's voice reading an old storybook, his tone steady despite the storm behind his eyes. At dawn, Layla called again. "Ethan, you need to come downtown, now." He arrived to find her seated with 2 officers, Briggs among them, and Annabelle. She rose when he entered, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, "I wanted to thank you." He frowned. "For what?" "For not signing that NDA, for not taking their money. It gave us time to track something." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were printouts, emails, internal memos, timestamps. Finn Rivers found this on the Halden Group server, proof they paid someone to delete the diner footage. They didn't just tamper with evidence, they committed a felony. Briggs let out a low whistle. "That's the break we needed." Layla leaned back in her chair. "This changes everything. We can turn the civil suit around. We file for malicious prosecution, defamation, and obstruction. It's over for them." Ethan looked at Annabelle. "You risked your career for this. I have more to lose if I don't," she said simply. The next few days passed in a blur of statements, filings, and phone calls. Reporters tried to ambush Ethan outside his building. One even followed him to Lucy's school before the principal threatened to call the police. Through it all, Layla stayed steady, orchestrating the chaos with the precision of someone used to impossible odds. Marcus's testimony went public, the deleted footage became evidence, and whispers began spreading through Halden's offices that the board wanted Ryan gone before the scandal burned through the company. One night after Lucy had fallen asleep, Ethan sat by the window staring at the skyline. The city looked different now, not softer, but somehow less distant. A knock came at the door. When he opened it, Annabelle stood there again, drenched from the rain, holding a folder. "There's a press conference tomorrow," she said. "Langford Innovations is hosting it. My father's agreed to let me speak. We're going to release the unedited footage. The truth." Ethan's first instinct was disbelief. "You sure about that? Once you do, there's no going back." She nodded. "That's the point." He studied her for a long moment. The billionaire's daughter and the janitor. 2 lives that should never have crossed, and yet here they were, bound by something neither fully understood but both believed in. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Her answer was quiet. "Because when you stood up in that diner, you reminded me of what it looks like to live without fear. I can't forget that." When she left, Ethan looked down at the folder she'd given him. Inside were copies of the restored security footage, clear, crisp, undeniable. The frame showed Ryan Halden's hand gripping her wrist, the flash of pain on her face, the frozen silence of everyone else. And then Ethan stepping forward. Not a hero, just a man refusing to look away. He stayed up late watching it over and over, not out of pride but disbelief. The entire storm that had wrecked his life had begun in this single moment. 5 seconds of courage that the world had twisted into scandal. And now, somehow, it was coming back full circle. Across town in his father's office, Ryan Halden was unraveling. He paced like a trapped animal while his lawyer spoke in low tones. "They have the footage, Ryan. The deleted data. It's over." Ryan slammed his hand against the glass wall. "No, it's not. We'll sue them for slander, for breach." The lawyer cut him off. "You'll do nothing. The board has already voted. You're being removed as CEO." When morning came, the sky was bright for the first time in weeks. No rain, no fog, just clear air and the smell of pavement drying in sunlight. Ethan dressed quietly, adjusting the collar of his worn shirt. Lucy watched him from the doorway. "Are you going to work, Daddy?" "Something like that," he said, smiling faintly. "You'll see it on TV later." At the press conference, reporters crowded the auditorium, lights flashing like 1,000 small judgments. Annabelle stood at the podium, her voice calm and unwavering. "2 weeks ago," she began, "a man stood up when no one else would. His name is Ethan Cole. The video you've seen was a lie. Here's the truth." The footage played behind her on a massive screen. The room went silent. Every word that followed would change all their lives. And as Ethan watched from the back, half hidden by the crowd, he realized this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every person who'd ever been told to stay quiet, to keep their head down, to let power win. For the first time in a long time, he believed something simple and profound. Maybe decency could still make noise. The air inside the Langford Innovations Auditorium felt electric, too bright, too sharp, humming with 1,000 unspoken things. Cameras lined the back wall like a row of patient rifles. Every seat was filled, journalists shoulder to shoulder, microphones raised. Outside, news vans blocked both sides of the boulevard. The world had come to watch the daughter of a billionaire take on another billionaire's son. Annabelle stood behind the podium, one hand resting on the stack of papers she didn't need. Her other hand trembled slightly, hidden behind the lectern. She looked calm, polished, perfectly composed. Only Finn, standing by the stage exit, noticed the slight tension in her shoulders. Ethan watched from the back, blending in with the technicians. He didn't belong here, not under chandeliers and screens projecting corporate logos. But Layla had insisted he attend. "This is your fight, too," she'd said. He'd tried to protest. "No, it's our truth. You just gave it weight." Now, standing among the glow of camera lenses and murmuring reporters, Ethan wasn't sure if he was proud or terrified. Annabelle adjusted the microphone. The feedback crackled, then steadied. "Good afternoon," she began. "Before we discuss the next phase of Langford's work, I want to talk about something more important than technology. I want to talk about integrity." The word hung in the air like a slow pulse. She glanced down once at her notes, then lifted her gaze toward the crowd. 2 weeks ago, an incident took place at the Silver Spoon Diner, a small restaurant on the east side of this city. Many of you have seen the edited footage. Many of you have read headlines that twisted what happened into something convenient. Today, you'll see the truth. The room went silent except for the faint hum of servers. Finn dimmed the lights. The massive screen behind Annabelle flickered, then played the restored video. The image quality was sharp now, the glare gone, every frame clear. It began with a simple, ordinary moment, a man in a gray uniform sitting alone at a table, a waitress placing a coffee cup beside him. Then another man entered, the gleam of a suit, the swagger of entitlement. The first contact was brief, a hand, a wrist, a moment of unwanted control. The audience gasped softly as they saw the tension in Annabelle's face, the pain that crossed it before she masked it behind professionalism. Then Ethan stood, calm, controlled. The small movement that shifted everything. He didn't shout, didn't strike, he simply intervened. The twist, the release, the stillness, and then the look on his face, a quiet firmness that made the moment undeniable. When the footage ended, there was a beat of silence before the murmurs began. Low, sharp, questioning. Annabelle let it build for a few seconds, then spoke again. "The man you just saw defending me is Ethan Cole," she said. "A janitor, a veteran, a single father. He's been called unstable, violent, dangerous. He's lost his jobs, his reputation, and his peace because someone with more power decided he couldn't be right." Camera flashes erupted. Ethan instinctively stepped back, but Layla's hand on his arm steadied him. "Let her finish," she whispered. Annabelle continued. "The man who grabbed me is Ryan Halden. He's the heir to Halden Financial Group. His lawyers deleted the original footage and replaced it with a doctored version. They used their influence to manipulate media coverage and silence witnesses. But the truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how much money you spend burying it. As if on cue, Lieutenant Briggs entered from the side door, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. They moved with deliberate calm through the aisle toward the front. Ryan Halden, sitting in the 3rd row beside his father, went pale. He half rose from his seat. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. Briggs didn't slow. "Ryan Halden," he said, voice clear enough for every microphone to catch. "You're under arrest for assault, destruction of evidence, and criminal intimidation." The flash of cameras was blinding now. Reporters surged forward, questions firing like bullets. "Mr. Halden, did you alter the footage? Was the assault covered up by your father's firm? Mr. Langford, will you comment on the arrest?" But Annabelle's voice cut through the chaos, steady and controlled. "This isn't about revenge," she said. "It's about accountability. It's about the simple act of standing up when everyone else looks away." Ryan's father tried to intervene, his voice raised. "You're ruining 2 families for the sake of optics." Annabelle turned toward him. "No," she said quietly, "for the sake of truth." As officers led Ryan toward the exit, the crowd erupted again. Some shouting questions, others simply watching, spellbound by the collapse of arrogance made public. Ethan stood frozen, unsure what to feel: vindication, relief. All he knew was that for the first time in weeks, the weight on his chest eased slightly. Layla leaned closer. "It's over," she murmured. He shook his head. "No, it's just beginning." Later, after the conference cleared, Annabelle found Ethan standing outside near the loading dock. The rain had returned, soft and gray. He was staring out at the skyline, hands shoved in his jacket pockets. "You didn't have to do that?" he said when she approached. She smiled faintly. "You said that once already." "I think we both know I did." He turned to face her. "Your father's not happy." "He'll survive," she said. "He cares about reputation. I care about redemption." She paused, studying him. "You lost everything because of me. I can't undo that, but I can try to build something from it." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "The Langford Foundation is starting an initiative. Safe workplace. Training programs, legal support, awareness campaigns. You should lead security and intervention. You already live what we're trying to teach." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "I'm a janitor, not a hero." "You're a man who acted when it mattered," she said simply. "That's rarer than any degree hanging on a wall." He looked down at the puddle by his boots, the rain forming small ripples. "I'm not sure I fit your world." "Neither did I," she replied. Inside, reporters swarmed the lobby as Martin Langford held his own press statement. His tone was measured, controlled. "Langford Innovations supports integrity and transparency," he said. "Today, we've witnessed both." His PR chief leaned in. "This will boost public trust." Martin ignored the comment, his gaze following his daughter's silhouette through the glass doors, as she spoke quietly with Ethan. There was a trace of something unfamiliar in his expression. Not pride exactly, but understanding. By evening, the story had gone national. News anchors replayed the footage side by side. The doctored clip versus the original. One host said, "This case has become a symbol of working-class courage versus corporate corruption." Another called Ethan, "the man who reminded America what decency looks like." Layla's office phone didn't stop ringing. Offers poured in. Speaking engagements, interviews, even a book deal. Ethan declined them all. He spent that night at home, sitting on the couch with Lucy asleep beside him, her small hand curled around his. The television flickered quietly, showing the same press conference he'd just lived through. His face appeared on screen for a second before the feed cut to Annabelle's closing words. Courage isn't measured by power or position. It's measured by what you do when the world tells you to stay silent. He muted the sound and let the silence settle. It felt strange, peaceful, almost unreal. Outside, the city was still buzzing with the story, but inside, the apartment was calm. Lucy stirred, half asleep. "Daddy," she whispered, "did you fix the bad thing?" He brushed her hair back gently. "We're working on it, sweetheart." Across the city, Ryan Halden sat in a holding cell, staring at the floor, the arrogance stripped clean away. The man who had treated people like disposable tools now had nothing to command but the walls around him. And somewhere higher up in the Langford Tower, Martin Langford stood in his office, overlooking the glowing city. Finn stood beside him, hands clasped behind his back. "She did the right thing," Finn said quietly. Martin exhaled slowly. "Yes," he admitted, "and I almost forgot what that looked like." As the rain tapered off, Ethan stepped out onto his small balcony. The air smelled clean again, washed of smoke and lies. He thought about all that had happened, the fight, the fallout, the lies, and now the truth finally surfacing like a long-buried seed breaking through concrete. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was fighting to stay alive. He felt like he was living for something. Tomorrow would bring new problems, lawyers, statements, maybe even threats. But tonight, for a brief and quiet moment, the world had tilted toward justice. And Ethan Cole, a janitor who'd simply refused to look away, stood at the center of it, not as a victim or a symbol, but as proof that decency, once awakened, could not be silenced again. A month passed before the noise began to fade. The headlines moved on. The reporters found new scandals to chase, and the city returned to its indifferent rhythm. But for Ethan Cole, life had quietly shifted into something unfamiliar, something stable. He no longer carried the weight of 3 jobs or the constant anxiety of survival. The civil suit had been dismissed. Ryan Halden had been indicted on multiple charges, and Langford Innovations had officially launched the Safe Workplace Initiative. The world didn't change overnight, but small ripples were beginning to form. Ripples that started with one night in a rainy diner. On Monday morning, Ethan stood in front of the mirrored glass entrance of Langford Tower, wearing a clean shirt and a lanyard that still felt strange around his neck. The badge read Director of Security and Intervention Training. He had laughed when Annabelle first offered it, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. Now he was here, part of something bigger than survival. He glanced at his reflection. Same tired eyes, same scar along his jaw from Kandahar, but maybe, just maybe, a lighter kind of tired. Inside, the lobby hummed with early activity. Engineers, interns, assistants, all rushing to start their day. They glanced at him with polite curiosity, unsure how to place him among the sleek suits and polished shoes. Annabelle met him by the elevators, dressed simply in navy and white. She carried a folder in one hand and 2 coffees in the other. "You made it," she said, smiling. "I wasn't sure if you'd actually show." "Still deciding if I belong here," he replied. "You do," she said. "This place needs more people who remember what real life looks like." When the elevator doors closed, the noise of the building faded. "I keep expecting someone to tell me it's a mistake," Ethan said. "That the janitor wandered into the wrong floor." "If anyone says that," she replied, "remind them that the janitor taught the board what courage looks like." He chuckled under his breath. "You've got a way with words." "Occupational hazard," she said, and the smile she gave him this time wasn't professional. It was personal. The Safe Workplace Initiative headquarters occupied a refurbished wing on the 12th floor. White walls, open spaces, the faint smell of new paint. A quote was printed across one wall in clean black lettering: "Integrity is what you do when no one is watching." Ethan stopped when he saw it. The photo below the quote caught him off guard. It was the diner, grainy, imperfect, but unmistakable. Him standing between the tables, eyes steady, the moment before everything changed. "You really put that here?" he asked quietly. Annabelle nodded. People forget what courage looks like when they're comfortable. It's a reminder. That week, they began their first training sessions. Ethan stood in front of a small group: managers, security officers, shift supervisors from other companies who had signed up for the pilot program. He felt the same nerves he used to feel before patrol briefings. "You don't need to be a soldier to stand up," he said, voice low but steady. "You just need to recognize the line between right and wrong and be willing to cross it when others won't." He showed them footage, case studies, simple de-escalation techniques. But what resonated most wasn't the drills or the slides. It was the stories, real moments of intervention, of people refusing to stay silent. Layla handled the legal education portion, sharp and eloquent, turning complex laws into human language. Marcus Glenn joined as a field instructor, his voice warm and grounded. Annabelle coordinated everything, her precision guiding the program like a conductor with a quiet baton. Together, they built something that felt less like a corporation and more like a mission. One afternoon, Ethan found himself standing alone in the empty training hall after everyone left. The sunlight slanted through the blinds, cutting gold lines across the floor. He thought about how far things had come. A month ago, this same city had treated him like a criminal. Now people sent letters thanking him for his courage, for reminding them that decency wasn't outdated. He didn't know what to do with gratitude any more than he knew how to handle hatred. It all felt too heavy to carry. But in moments like this, in the quiet, he let himself believe it had meant something. Annabelle stepped into the doorway, her voice soft. "Thinking again?" "Trying not to," he said. "How's that working?" "Badly." She walked in, arms folded. "You're not used to things being calm, are you?" He smiled faintly. "Calm feels suspicious." "Get used to it," she said. "You earned it." He looked at her for a long moment. "You could have stayed silent too. None of this would have touched you." She met his eyes. Silence would have cost more. That evening, they left the building together. The city outside was glowing under a warm sunset, the kind that turned skyscrapers into molten gold. Down the block, a newsstand displayed a magazine cover, From Diner to Reform: How One Act of Courage Changed Corporate America. The photo showed Annabelle at the podium, and Ethan blurred in the background. He shook his head. "They make it sound grand." "It was," she said. "You just don't see it because you lived it." A week later, Ethan brought Lucy to the park. She'd begged him all morning to teach her how to ride without training wheels. The small bike wobbled as she pushed off, determination wrinkling her brow. "Keep your balance," he called, jogging beside her. She wobbled once, twice, then steadied. When she made it to the end of the path without falling, she turned around, triumphant. "I did it!" He laughed, clapping his hands. "Yeah, you did." Annabelle stood nearby, holding a box of cookies she'd baked herself. Terrible, slightly burnt cookies, but Lucy adored them anyway. "She's brave," Annabelle said. "She gets that from you." "Maybe," he said, watching his daughter pedal back toward them. "Or maybe she just refuses to fall quietly." They sat on a bench as the sun began to dip. The park was full of life. Children shouting, dogs chasing frisbees, the world moving without noticing two people who had once turned it upside down. Annabelle handed him a cookie. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. "Every day," he admitted. "Not because of what happened, but because of what almost didn't. If I'd stayed sitting, if I'd told myself it wasn't my business." "You changed more than you realize," she said. "You made people remember that doing nothing is a choice, too." He looked at her then, truly looked. The woman who had once hidden behind a waitress uniform now sat beside him, free of pretense, grounded, stronger than ever. "You did the same," he said. She smiled softly. "Maybe we both just did what was overdue." When night fell, the city lights shimmered in the distance like stars that had lost their way. Lucy leaned against him, already half asleep. Annabelle stood to leave, but hesitated. "You ever think about what comes next?" she asked. "Tomorrow," he said. "We start training another group, and after that, another." "No," she said gently. "I mean for you." He looked down at Lucy, then back at her. "For now, this is enough." She nodded, understanding that not every story needed a new beginning right away. Weeks later, the Silver Spoon Diner reopened after renovations. The owner, a wiry man with kind eyes, had hung a new sign by the register. Ethan noticed it the moment he walked in one evening with Annabelle and Lucy. The sign read, "This establishment does not tolerate harassment of any kind. We stand up for each other here." Beneath it, framed on the wall, was a photo. Ethan standing in that same diner, raincoat soaked, eyes steady, hand raised. Not in violence, but in protection. They sat at a booth, the same corner where everything began. The waitress, new to the job, poured coffee with a smile. The smell of frying oil and cinnamon toast filled the air. Lucy giggled, dipping her spoon into whipped cream. Annabelle looked around the diner, her eyes reflecting the neon light. "Hard to believe this is where it started," she said. "Harder to believe how far it went," Ethan replied. Outside, the rain began again, gentle and rhythmic, washing the city in silver. Ethan reached across the table, covering Annabelle's hand with his. For a long moment, they just listened. To the rain, to the faint hum of the jukebox, to the quiet peace that had replaced chaos. Ethan Cole never wanted to be a hero. He was a man who refused to be a bystander, who believed that silence was a form of surrender. And though the world would move on, though headlines would fade and new crises would rise, one truth would remain carved into memory: the simple, unstoppable power of decency. Because in a world built on noise and compromise, sometimes all it takes to change everything is the courage to stand up when no one else will. If you want more stories of ordinary people standing up to power and changing everything, hit subscribe right now. Share this story with someone who still believes in doing the right thing, and tell me in the comments, would you have stood up that night in the diner